All right, hello everyone. My name is Ravi Ahuja, and this is my long oral presentation for anthropology. Today, I'm going to be looking at read receipts as digital authority, including how mobile communication produces power, interpretation, as well as identity. So the first half concept that I'm going to be using is frames by Agar, and the second half concepts include quantification and blackboxing by Caitlin Zaloom, language ideologies by John Haviland, referential obscenity by Susan Sazier, and articulation by Jim Tallbear. So here's a quick summary of my first oral presentation. I looked at three different types of frames: a group chat frame, a close friend frame, and an authority frame. And I really delved deeper into how read receipts play a different or have a different meaning depending on which frame. So the group chat frame being left on red in here is not that big of a deal. And the example for my short oral presentation was I texted my friends that I was going to be 5 minutes late in our group chat, and they both opened the message. I saw the opened receipt, but it wasn't that big of a deal because I wasn't looking for a response. The group chat frame is more for like sending information. You're not really looking for that response. On the other hand, there's a close friend frame, and this is a one-on-one setting, and being left on read or being left on delivered carries emotional weight in this frame. Because it's a one-on-one setting, you really look for like a response, and not having a response or being left unopened carries a lot of weight, and you start looking at the deeper meaning, such as why did they leave me on read? Did I do something wrong? And stuff like that. And the last frame is the authority frame. This could be with a professional, a coach, or even like a parent. And in this frame, it's kind of like a power. And the example from my short oral presentation was I sent a message to my dad and he didn't respond until like the next morning, but I didn't really look into it because I knew he might have been busy or something like that. Expanding on that, I want to look at this idea of platform specific frames between Snapchat, iMessage, and Instagram. So each of these frames or each of these like platforms have different frames. Snapchat is meant to be for like casual disappearing messages. However, our generation uses Snapchat just as much as iMessage, if not even more. And Snapchat now has like the same platform specific frame as iMessage does. And iMessage's frame is like heavier because messages don't disappear, and messages on iMessage carry more emotional weight. So Snapchat and iMessage are kind of similar. Instagram was supposed to be kind of be like Snapchat with the casual, and Instagram like platform specific frames for that, like being left on read or being left on delivered on Instagram is not that big of a deal because people primarily use Instagram just to send like funny videos. Instagram is not like a primary source of communication. Looking at new data in interviews, I did two casual interviews, one with my sister and one with my friend. And there are two ideas that they said that were like super relatable and kind of summarize like the main idea of this long oral presentation. And my sister said, whenever I asked her what happens if someone doesn't open your message, and she said she starts to panic. And my friend on said, like, I asked him, like, what happens if do you sometimes leave people unopened? And he said, I avoid opening messages because opening feels like a commitment to an immediate response. And then he also said, I don't have the energy for this, which is kind of funny. And the main idea to that these two kind of show is that read receipts have emotions tied to them. And just the word delivered or opened does carry emotional weight. And it was really cool how just like these two lines summarize that. So the first concept that I want to talk about is quantification. And this is the idea of turning social behavior into just a simple number. And read receipts are exactly like this. They turn a relationship into a numerical signal. And this numerical signal is trackable through like the time. And looking at the cartoon, opened 1 minute ago. And the response was, I know it's just a number, but it feels like evidence. And we're going to look at this even more with the topic, with the concept of black boxing. But this simple number shows so much, and you start to interpret it. In addition, looking at the other example, Snapchat, I was opened for 18 hours, and the quantification turns the what happened in this like 18 hours into just one simple 18 hours. Moving on to the next concept, black boxing, this kind of explains what happens when we see that number. And the idea of black boxing is hiding the entire process and just showing the final simple number or output. So for the example, opened 5 minutes ago. So the black boxing is the 5 minutes. It hides whatever happened in that 5 minutes and just shows that 5 minutes. And this kind of hides all the context and it makes you come up with your own interpretation of what happened. So in those 5 minutes, the person could have been driving, they could have gotten busy with something else, but however, only the number 5 minutes is shown. And this leads to your own reasons for like why they're not responding. You start to think, oh, they're just ignoring me. They don't even want to respond. And you start really delving into the deeper meaning of why they're not responding. The third concept is language ideologies. And this is basically what language reveals or means. And in this scenario, the read receipt, the word delivered, as well as like the Snapchat arrow, those show and reveal a lot. So I like to frame this as like if they cared, they'd answer. And that's kind of the interpretation that many people have. So for example, looking at the Snapchat example, I was on delivered for an hour. And although that person could have been like once again driving, they could have been taking a nap, they could have just been busy with something else. However, just seeing that delivered on 1 hour shows that like if they cared, they would answer. So it also lets me fill in like the own meaning on that. Like they could have been doing something else. They could have just like not been responding. And this kind of ties into like what my friend says, if my best friend leaves me on red, I do not care, but if it's like a significant other, it hurts. And that was like really cool to see. The fourth concept is referential obscenity. And connecting this to read receipts was like really interesting because although they're not very like similar in a way, the idea behind referential obscenity and the idea behind like the delivered or opened or like the timestamps are very similar because both of them evoke like social energy, tone, and emotional force. So it was really cool how both like a read receipt, delivered, open timestamps are very similar to like referential obscenity. So looking at the text message, I texted it at 7:46 and a response was there at 7:49. And looking at what my sister said, when someone responds immediately every time, I feel important to them. And I basically just asked her like what happens when someone responds immediately. And she basically said like if they respond fast, then it shows that like they care and close, and that like indexes the fact that responding instantly shows closeness. Responding slowly is also kind of hard to like put a word to it because they could just be busy and responding slowly could maybe if they opened it and then they're just taking time to respond, but then that also could show that like they're putting effort into the response. So that one could be like a very ambiguous and have multiple meanings. And then like leaving someone undelivered, that shows power in a way that like you interpret that as power or like they're just not responding to you. You may start to look into deeper meaning like why are they not responding or something like that. And then opening immediately but replying later, this could be seen as rude. And this kind of ties in back into the idea of like black boxing, where you just see that simple number, you don't see what happened in between. And if someone doesn't respond to you for a long time after opening it, you could be like, oh, that's pretty rude. But in reality, they could be doing something else where they're not able to respond, such as like driving or like taking a nap or doing some other task. So those are how referential obscenity connects to these ideas. And the last concept is articulation. And this is like combining all of the different like cues to form your own meaning. So we see delivered, we see 3 days, and then in the text message we see Thursday, November 27th at 7:26 and delivered. And basically with all of these different like timestamps delivered and read, you form your own meaning about what happened. So if I was left on delivered for 3 days, I'm like, oh well, they don't want to respond. So I combine like the delivered with the 3 days. So in conclusion, it's really cool how read receipts are a really cool piece of technology because they show so much for just being so simple. And they reveal an entire world of what happened. And that is my long oral presentation for anthropology.